Chapter 1. The Yoga of Arjuna Grief. About this chapter. The communication between Arjuna and Krishna in the Gita come to us through the words of Sanjaya, who is the advisor to Dhritarashtra, the king of the Kurus. Blind since birth, he serves as the king of Hastinapura, but is not the rightful ruler. The Gita begins with Dhritarashtra aiming to keep the kingdom in the hands of his family and willing to battle against Arjuna, the rightful heir, in order to keep it. Sanjaya has a psychic gift to see and hear faraway events, in this case, a distant battlefield. The battle about to begin will last 18 days and develops into one of the most incredible fights recorded in ancient history. The place chosen for this battle is the sacred field of Kurukshetra, which is such a paradox for the expected mass slaughter. Yet, the interplay between the sacred and the secular is a fundamental focus in the Gita. In this chapter, we see the friendship between the honorable warrior Arjuna and his charioteer Krishna. Whatever Arjuna wishes, Krishna delivers. Here, Arjuna has directed Krishna to place him between the two armies to see the work ahead. He is overcome by the grief of seeing his own friends and family on each side of the battle. He considers the inhumanity of war and why it may be better for him to just surrender personally to prevent the death of others, and reflects upon the fact that he would not even be able to enjoy victory if his own side won. He thinks about the lives lost, the natural consequence to families affected, his fears of feeling outnumbered. He carries with himself his awareness of his history as a revered fighter, his years away from his rightful place on the land he should have been helping towards safety and prosperity, and also a rage against the injustice that he and his honest army has lived through. Yet, compassion is at his core. His charioteer is aware of all of this. In this chapter, Arjuna is in utter despair about what to do, and Krishna is listening patiently with no specific direction. Now, chapter 1 for the healthcare guru. To look at this chapter through the eyes of a healthcare practitioner applying it to his or her daily work, whether performed in a hospital, clinic, private practice, seniors or support home, or in a personal home, we can see that each person entering a healthcare role on any day can face the experience that Arjuna faces in this chapter. There is a level of bravery and courage that covers the despair of particular moments that any person providing care can and often will eventually, if not regularly, face. It's so interesting to me that this first chapter is about the grief of the experience, and since I focus on grief with clients in my practice, I was already particularly mindful of this experience. Seen from the model used in my private practice, grief can be described as any experience that creates a conflicting emotion. So in Arjuna's case, a warrior coming to a battle to do an action from a clear head to overthrow oppressive and dishonest rulers gives him the confidence in doing what's right. Yet seeing his own family on both sides of this battle and foreseeing losses on both sides brought up much sadness and distress. Similarly, in healthcare, many decisions bring us to similar mixed emotional experiences. When a dear patient is sharing their illness and we are aware that there is some news to give for suggested treatment, we may experience a feeling of relief to be able to offer the patient a suggestion that we feel will help. Yet we may also know this is not an easy treatment because of some known reason. Maybe the possible side effects of the treatment, maybe the cost, maybe the uncertainty of outcome. This uncertainty can create grief on both sides of the experience, for the provider of care and the recipient of it too. If we are working with chronic health conditions, we may even need to give a diagnosis that has a poor prognosis. Sometimes a family doesn't want us to tell an aging parent that they may not live for beyond a few months. This is an ethical dilemma. Maybe a family is deciding just amongst themselves the same idea. In such a case, they are also part of the healthcare providers in the time. This can also put one into what has been termed Maybe a family is deciding just amongst themselves the same idea. In such a case, they are also part of the healthcare providers in the time. This can also put one into what has been termed the Arjuna grief state. When we look at the title of this chapter, at least in the version with the commentary by Swami Chinmayananda, we can notice that it's titled Yoga and Arjuna Grief. Yoga means a union, and this indeed represents such a time. The experience that the healthcare provider becomes joined or united with the grief experienced at the time. Often this can lead to a very confused mental state, which does not allow for easy clarity in decision making. Let's take a look at the other things that may run through the mind of a healthcare provider in meaningful decision making moments. Often questions of nutrition come into play in serious health conditions. What if a person has a prognosis of 3 months to live and are craving fried foods and ice cream? Do we feed them this to allow for a dying wish? What if they continue to live but now have diabetes because they got used to a sweet tooth from that time and now may need to amputate a leg? Every decision creates an effect, and not only for the patient and family, but for the care provider too. Everyone feels the effects of grief in such experiences. Many patients with dementia will insist on driving even after their licenses have been taken away. Do we support their freedom to drive or make sure they do not have access to the car keys, even though many heated arguments ensue in the home? As a healthcare provider, we may not even see the state of confusion in such a patient in our office, and even though the family is letting us know about the confused mental state of the family member, the patient may convince us that they are fine. Some doctors have been convinced through the words and actions of former suicidal patients that they are well, only days before learning of their actual successful suicide. What if you work in emergency medicine and each action taken is particularly critical? I know an ER surgeon who made some questionable decisions in a heart surgery, which led to the death of his patient. He received a reprimand from a board meeting from the hospital and resumed work. It is the conscience of the doctor that will have the long-term effects. He may learn and be extra mindful in his work in the future, or he may feel more comfortable in taking questionable actions in the future, feeling that the hospital will still support his work, which may in fact come from an authentic place. But only the surgeon will know for sure, and that is if he spends a little time in conscious self-reflection. Each of these experiences will bring up some grief. Perhaps a surgeon was already in an Arjuna grief space if he was fearful about his own skills in the surgery. Maybe other life experiences were influencing his decision at the surgery time. Only the surgeon will know. Which brings up one very important detail to learn from this chapter. Arjuna would have arrived at this battle with adrenaline fueling his system, determined to take action for a right cause. Up to that point, he had plenty of time to let his mind think about the injustice of the situation, but about his own lost title and role, and the many years it took to get his acclaimed status, which he had lost for years prior to this battle. He would have been carrying his hurt pride, his loneliness, his embarrassment, and his need to prove himself. He would have been missing friends and family, missing prosperity, missing his comforts. He was fired up to do the right thing for much of this thinking. Yet seeing the task before him, he was frozen by his emotions of anxiety, grief, sadness, and despair. Now let's look at the health professional or care provider. Most of us come out of many years of study with high debt and high regard from family and friends. Many will be eager to put the learning into practice and joyfully do so. What happens when something breaks the simple and easy flow of the care? Sometimes this can happen because a patient has the same diagnosis a family member has, or vice versa, where one may learn that a family member has received the same diagnosis as a patient who is not doing well. Perhaps either may have even passed away. What if the healthcare provider is not well because of concern? What if the healthcare provider is not well because of concern over a personal matter? It may be financial, relationship, or personal illness related. It may be financial, relationship, or personal illness related. When working with others, whether friends, family, or patients, the healthcare professional is supposed to be the one that has it all together. We have the training so we can provide the information or the care needed by others, right? Or can we? The clarity with which any person comes into their work will, of course, determine the clarity of their decisions. Many healthcare professionals, and this is certainly not limited to healthcare, are juggling many other responsibilities such as children, personal relationships, health concerns for many, including themselves, and the usual cooking, cleaning, taking care of any pets, daily errands, etc. When a crisis arises in any of these areas, most healthcare practitioners will still need to face the battle of the task before them in their workplace. Yet this group is the least likely to ask for help in their own healthcare. The result is the same in this situation. The result is the same for all in this situation. First is the instinctive response or reaction to the need at hand. Then the occasional experience arises, as in Arjuna's case, where one feels immobilized in a task that would normally feel quite natural. And in this moment is the opportunity to truly reflect upon one's experience. When we look at the healthcare system, we may also notice some normalized experiences in the medical system which do not seem fair and may to some feel oppressive or at least unfair to some patients. For example, an oncologist may choose not to work with a client who does not want the suggested chemotherapy recommendation, even though the risks for the treatment are many pages long. Sometimes doctors will not even order tests like an MRI or a CT scan in situations. Sometimes doctors will not even order tests like an MRI or a CT scan in such situations. Are healthcare providers rude or abrupt with their patients because of their own personal biases? From a need for control over who they work with in their practice? Or maybe from other concerns like knowing the limited budgets of their institutions? Only the individual practitioner will know. Any of these scenarios can put a healthcare provider into an Arjuna grief situation, where they may become frozen or numb, and the person may feel unable to make clear or easy decisions. And there is often no right decisions in healthcare ethics that lead to action, except the awareness that one has chosen to provide healthcare to patients or to a friend or family member needing care. When a healthcare provider is faced with a sudden awareness of the overwhelming emotions and thoughts felt in such situations, is often when a true space for awakening can take place. As Swami Chinmayananda writes at the conclusion of this chapter, for learning and living the Gita, the Arjuna condition is the initial sadhana. Sadhana means realization. As Swami Chinmayananda writes at the conclusion of this chapter, quote, for learning and living the Gita, the Arjuna condition is the initial sadhana, end quote. Sadhana means realization in Sanskrit, and it's used in Hindu and Buddhist, and it's used. Sadhana means realization in Sanskrit, and it's used in Hindu and Buddhist Tantrism. To clarify, the Arjuna condition is grief. Do we know how much we are carrying with ourselves? Know that any moment may remind us, as it did Arjuna, to understand ourselves. In such times, people often turn to their higher consciousness for guidance. This could be a trusted friend too in person, or it could be through personal communication with one's own God or the universe. Arjuna has turned to his friend Krishna.